The sun was particularly golden that September afternoon, creating silver reflections on the propeller of the private plane that Edward Santana was meticulously checking before takeoff. The scent of aviation fuel mixed with the soft perfume of gardenias, his wife's favorite, lingered in the air of the private hangar. At 38, Edward was a man who had inherited not only the fortune of the banking family, but also the passion for aviation that he had transformed into a refined hobby. His fingers glided over the controls with the precision of someone who had spent years perfecting every movement. "Honey, I have a strange feeling about this flight," murmured Helen, his 27-year-old wife, while adjusting little Sophia's seatbelt, their 1-year-old youngest. Helen's brown eyes reflected an uneasiness she couldn't explain. "I had a terrible dream last night. The plane crashing, the children crying." Edward smiled in that charming way that had won her over years ago, running his hand through his perfectly styled black hair. "It was just a nightmare, sweetheart. You know I've been a pilot for 10 years. This plane has passed all its inspections." He kissed her forehead tenderly. "Besides, I promised the twins we'd arrive in time to see the sunset at your father's ranch." Michael and Gabriel, 4 years old, bounced in their seats with typical childhood energy, their brown hair, a maternal inheritance, shining under the light filtered through the aircraft windows. "Daddy, are we going to fly really high today?" asked Michael, pressing his little face against the glass. "I want to touch the clouds." "We'll fly higher than the birds," Edward promised, starting the engines. The familiar roar of the turbines calmed him. It was the sound of freedom, control, the technical perfection he so loved. Before we continue this incredible story, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. What Edward couldn't know was that this flight would change his life forever. When they reached 3,000 feet altitude, flying over the mountains covered by the golden afternoon mist, a strange metallic noise echoed through the cockpit. Edward frowned, his blue eyes concentrating on the instruments that suddenly began flashing alarmingly. "Edward?" Helen's voice now carried palpable fear. "Left engine losing power," he murmured, his voice maintaining professional calm, even while his heart flourished. His hands moved quickly across the controls, trying to stabilize the aircraft that was beginning to lose altitude alarmingly. "I'm going to attempt an emergency landing." That's when the second engine failed. The deafening silence that followed was broken only by the sound of wind cutting through the metal fuselage. Edward fought against the controls, every fiber of his being focused on a single mission: protect his family. "Helen, hold the children! Emergency position!" In the seconds that followed, an eternity compressed into moments, Helen made a choice. As the ground approached dangerously, she leaned over Sophia, wrapping the baby with her own body, whispering a desperate prayer. "My God, protect my children." The impact was devastating. When Edward regained consciousness, the world was distorted. Smoke, the metallic taste of blood, muffled cries from the twins. But it was Helen's silence that terrified him. She was curved over Sophia, motionless, her breathing non-existent. A mother's final sacrifice. Her body had served as a human shield, saving their youngest daughter's life. "Helen, Helen, please." His voice was a broken whisper as he tried to touch her with violently trembling hands. But she was already gone, taking with her the dreams they had built together, leaving only the crushing weight of guilt that would settle in his chest like a stone. 8 months later, the mansion that once echoed with children's laughter and animated conversations between Edward and Helen now seemed like a silent mausoleum. Edward walked through the marble corridors like a ghost, avoiding the family portraits that the housekeeper, Mrs. Carmen, insisted on keeping displayed. Each photo was a blade cutting his soul. Helen smiling in the garden, the twins running toward her, Sophia taking her first steps. "Should have bought a new plane," he murmured to himself every night, the same words echoing in his mind like a mantra of self-destruction. Should have listened to her nightmares, should have stayed home. Guilt consumed him to such an extent that the simple sight of his children had become unbearable. Michael and Gabriel, with their brown hair and blue eyes, a perfect mixture of their parents, were constant reminders of the tragedy. Sophia, now a 1.5 years old, would extend her little arms toward him whenever he passed, but Edward would look away, taking refuge in work like a man drowns in alcohol. "Mr. Edward," Mrs. Carmen intercepted him on a cloudy May morning, her voice carrying the concern of someone who had raised 3 generations of the Santana family. "You need to hire a nanny for the children. I can't handle them alone anymore, and they need special attention. Michael asked me yesterday if Daddy doesn't like him anymore." Edward felt as if someone had punched his stomach. "He said that?" "He said he never sees you smile anymore, that it seems like Daddy is angry with them." Mrs. Carmen approached, her weathered hands gently touching Edward's arm. "Children don't understand grief, sir. They only know they lost their mother, and now it seems they're losing their father too." That afternoon, Edward received a proposal that would force him to leave the country for several weeks. Helen's company in Europe was facing a severe financial crisis, and as a widower, he was the only one who could resolve the legal and bureaucratic issues. The irony was bitter. Helen had died, but her responsibilities still bound him. "I need someone trustworthy," he told Mrs. Carmen, signing contracts he could barely read through the fog of guilt that clouded his thoughts. "Someone who understands children." That's how Isabella O'Connor entered their lives. Isabella had just turned 22 when she received the phone call that would change her life. Mrs. Carmen, a longtime friend of her mother's, called on a Sunday afternoon, while Isabella was helping prepare family lunch in the small house, where 5 siblings crowded into 3 bedrooms. "Patricia, I need Isabella," Mrs. Carmen said on the phone, her voice echoing through the kitchen where the smell of homemade bread competed with the aroma of sewing, remnants of fabric and thread that never completely left the environment. "It's to care for 3 children who lost their mother. The boss is a good man, but he's lost in grief." Isabella watched her mother, Patricia O'Connor, frown as she listened to the details. The premature, wrinkles around her green eyes, so similar to her daughter's, told the story of a woman who had raised 5 children on a seamstress's salary and the Irish willpower inherited from her great-grandparents. "It's a very wealthy family, Isabella," her mother explained after hanging up. "Mrs. Carmen says they're decent people, but the children are suffering greatly. The father can't even look at them properly." Isabella felt her heart contract. As the eldest daughter, she had practically raised her 4 younger siblings. She knew how to recognize the pain of an abandoned child, not physically but emotionally. She had seen it in the eyes of children at church whose parents were present in body but absent in soul. "I'll go," she said, her voice carrying the gentle determination that characterized her. "These children need someone." 2 days later, Isabella stepped foot for the first time in the Santana mansion. The wrought iron gate opened to reveal a garden that seemed straight out of a magazine with marble fountains and perfectly pruned rose bushes, but there was something melancholic in the air, as if all that beauty were in mourning. Mrs. Carmen received her at the main entrance, under a crystal chandelier that projected rainbows on the marble walls. "The boys are in their room," she whispered, as if speaking in a church. "Little Sophia is napping. Mr. Edward left for London this morning. He'll be away for 3 weeks." Isabella climbed the mahogany staircase, her steps muffled by the Persian carpet covering the steps. When she opened the children's room door, she found Michael and Gabriel sitting on the floor, playing silently with building blocks. But it wasn't normal play. They stacked the pieces methodically, without the joy typical of childhood. "Hello," she said softly, crouching down to the boy's eye level. "I'm Isabella. I came to play with you." Michael, the more talkative of the twins, looked at her with suspicion. "Are you going away too?" "I don't plan on going anywhere," Isabella replied, and something in the sincerity of her voice made Gabriel look up for the first time. In the days that followed, Isabella transformed the silent mansion. She brought paints and paper, creating colorful murals on the playroom walls. She taught the twins to make houses with sheets and pillows, fortresses where they could be pirates or astronauts. Most importantly, she taught them to laugh again. "Bella!" screamed Sophia, now almost 2 years old, running toward Isabella every morning. The baby had quickly adopted the young Irish woman as her new maternal figure, and Isabella received her with open arms and kisses on her chubby little face. But it was the silent moments that most touched Isabella's heart. When she found Michael looking out the window, waiting for a father who never came home early. When Gabriel drew pictures of a family with Daddy always distant. When Sophia cried at night, calling for a mother who would never return. Daddy. Doesn't smile anymore, Michael confessed on a rainy afternoon, while Isabella helped him assemble a puzzle. I think he doesn't like us anymore. Isabella felt tears sting her eyes. Your daddy loves you very much, Michael. Sometimes when people get very sad, they forget how to show love, but the love is there, kept safe in their heart. How do you know? Asked Gabriel, always the more observant one. Because, Isabella pulled both boys into a tight hug. True love never disappears. It just gets hidden behind sadness. But one day the sadness will go away and the love will shine again. Edward returned from London on a grey Tuesday in June, carrying not only his luggage, but also the weight of 3 weeks of paperwork and difficult decisions. Helen's company was saved, but the emotional cost of dealing with the last vestiges of his wife's life had been devastating. Every document signed, every account closed, every memory packed. Everything seemed to finalize a chapter he wasn't ready to close yet. His afternoon meeting had been cancelled due to a storm that prevented his client from boarding, a gift from destiny that he didn't immediately recognize. Edward arrived home at 3 in the afternoon, when normally he would only return at 9 at night. The mansion was different. He couldn't explain exactly what, but there was an energy in the air that he hadn't felt in months. Upon entering through the main hall, he heard something that made him stop immediately. Laughter. Children's laughter. His children's laughter. He followed the sound to the main living room, his steps becoming more cautious with each meter. What he saw left him completely paralyzed. On the beige velvet sofa, a young blonde woman was singing softly, her voice sweet as wild honey echoing through the marble walls. Michael and Gabriel were nestled one on each side of her, their little heads resting on her arms, eyes heavy with sleep. Sophia, the baby who barely recognized him lately, was in the young woman's lap, drinking from a bottle with the tranquility of someone who felt completely safe. The scene was of such pure beauty, so full of peace, that Edward felt as if he had been struck by lightning. For a moment, just one moment, his mind played a cruel trick, and he saw Helen there. His Helen singing to the children as she used to do before the accident, creating that atmosphere of unconditional love that he had lost along with her. Edward hid behind the marble wall that separated the hall from the living room, his heart beating so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Tears that he had suppressed for 8 months finally found their way, silently streaming down his face. Isabella hummed an old Irish melody, her voice transforming each note into a gentle caress that seemed to embrace the children with maternal tenderness. Edward swallowed hard. How long had it been since he'd seen his children so at peace? How long had it been since he'd seen them truly smile? He took a deep breath, ran his hand through his disheveled travel hair, and finally emerged from his hiding place. Isabella, because it could only be her, the mysterious nanny Mrs. Carman had spoken so much about, looked in his direction, and her green eyes widened in surprise. "Oh my God," she whispered, automatically straightening up on the sofa without waking the children. "Sir, you must be—" "Edward Santana," he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "And you must be Isabella." The young woman nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. There was something angelic about her appearance, not just the obvious physical beauty, but an aura of genuine kindness that emanated from every gesture. Edward immediately understood why his children had become attached to her. I didn't know you'd arrive early, sir," Isabella stammered, trying to get up without disturbing the sleeping children. "No," Edward gently raised his hand. "Please don't move. Don't wake them." He approached slowly, as if he were in an art gallery admiring a masterpiece he feared breaking with a sudden movement. "It's been so long since I've seen my children so peaceful." Isabella watched him carefully, noticing the deep, dark circles under his eyes, the unshaven beard, the weight of sadness he carried on his curved shoulders. "They are wonderful children, Mr. Edward. They just needed a little attention." "Attention," he repeated, the word sounding bitter in his mouth. "Something I haven't been able to give them." "Grief makes us do things we don't want to do," Isabella said softly. "But love doesn't disappear. They know you love them." Edward looked at her directly, surprised by the wisdom he saw in those young eyes. "And how do you know that?" "Because Michael tells me stories of when you used to take them flying. Gabriel shows me drawings where he draws you smiling. And Sophia, well, Sophia screams, 'Daddy,' every time she hears a car arriving." Isabella smiled sweetly. Children don't forget love, Mr. Edward. They just get confused when they can't feel it. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with meaning. Edward observed his children, really observed them, for the first time in months. Michael had grown, his hair was longer. Gabriel had a small new scar on his chin. Sophia seemed almost like a different child, smarter, more communicative. "How much time have I lost?" he murmured, more to himself than to Isabella. "It's never too late," she replied, her voice carrying a conviction that surprised him. "They're here. You're here. This is the only moment that matters." Edward nodded slowly, not trusting his own voice. I need to take a shower. Don't wake them." "And Isabella?" She looked at him expectantly. "Thank you." As he climbed the stairs, Edward felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope, tiny, fragile as a candle flame, but undeniably present. Maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back to his children. And maybe that green-eyed young woman was exactly the angel his broken family needed. In the weeks following Edward's return, the mansion's dynamic began to change subtly. For the first time since the accident, Edward sought to arrive home before Isabella ended her shift. He wouldn't admit it openly, but he had become addicted to observing the natural interaction she had with his children. "Bella, look what I made." Michael ran to Isabella on a sunny afternoon, holding a drawing where he had portrayed the family flying in a colorful airplane. But this time, unlike previous drawings, Daddy was smiling. "It's beautiful, Michael." Isabella crouched down to the boy's eye level, examining each detail of the drawing with genuine attention. "Tell me about this trip." "We're going to fly really high all the way to touch the clouds," Michael explained excitedly. "And Daddy is going to teach me how to pilot." Edward, who was watching from the doorway, felt his heart contract. When was the last time he had promised something like that to his children? When was the last time he had promised anything? "Michael has quite an imagination," Isabella commented later, when the children were having dinner. "He talks a lot about flying. I think he misses the airplane rides." Edward swallowed hard. "We don't fly anymore." "Because of the accident?" Isabella asked gently, not judging, just trying to understand. "Because of everything," he replied, his voice laden with pain he couldn't hide. "I can't even look at a plane without seeing it, without remembering." Isabella nodded understandingly. "Michael told me his mommy went to heaven in an airplane. He asks if someday you'll visit her." The simplicity of a child's observation hit Edward like a direct arrow. For months he had avoided any conversation about Helen, any mention of death, any attempt by the children to process the loss. He had thought he was protecting them, but Isabella was showing that maybe he was, just isolating them even more. "I don't know how to talk to them about this," he confessed in a rare display of vulnerability. "Speak from the heart," Isabella replied. "Children understand true love, even when it comes wrapped in sadness." It was that night that Edward made a decision that would change everything. Instead of locking himself in the office as he did every night, he went up to the twins' room. Isabella was reading them a story, her voice creating different voices for each character, drawing genuine laughter from Michael and Gabriel. Can I join?" Edward asked from the doorway, his voice hesitant. The little boy's eyes lit up like stars. "Daddy!" they screamed in unison, jumping out of bed to run toward him. Isabella smiled and stood up from the chair beside the bed. "I'll leave you to talk," she said, but Edward stopped her. "You don't need to leave. Please." He sat on the bed, pulling the two boys close to him. "Isabella, could you continue the story?" I'd like to listen too." And so, for the first time in 8 months, Edward spent a complete night with his children. He heard their laughter, answered their questions, felt their small hands cling to his as if afraid he would disappear again. "Daddy," said Gabriel sleepily, almost falling asleep, "can you read to us tomorrow too?" "Of course, my son," Edward replied, his voice choked with emotion. "Daddy will read every night you want." Isabella watched from the nearby armchair, silent, tears streaming down her face. There was something profoundly beautiful about seeing a family reconnect, witnessing love that had never really disappeared, just hidden behind fear and pain. A week later, Edward received an invitation that left him in panic. Bernardo and Helen Carvalho, the children's maternal grandparents, wanted to visit them. Not just a courtesy visit, they intended to spend the entire weekend at the mansion, to see how the children were being cared for in their mother's absence. They never liked me, Edward confessed to Isabella on a tense Sunday morning while supervising preparations to receive his in-laws. They thought Helen could have married someone better, someone more socially established. Aren't you socially established? Isabella asked, genuinely confused. The Santana's wealth was obvious in every detail of the mansion. I'm nouveau riche, Edward explained bitterly. My grandfather built everything from scratch. For families like the Carvalhos, that's still not enough. They're aristocracy from several generations. Isabella frowned. And what does that have to do with your children? It has everything to do with it. They're going to evaluate every detail of how I'm raising their grandchildren. And now with a young and, well, beautiful nanny, they'll think it's inappropriate. Edward's concern proved justified when Bernardo and Helen Carvalho arrived in a black limousine, dressed as if they were going to a high society event, even for a family visit. Bernardo, at 65, maintained the military bearing he had acquired in his youth, his graying moustache perfectly trimmed. Helen Carvalho, elegant at 62, wore jewelry that probably cost more than Isabella's house. Edward, Bernardo greeted coldly, shaking his hand with unnecessary force. Sorry I haven't come before. Business in New York was complex. Of course, Bernardo. I understand perfectly. Edward forced a diplomatic smile. The children are anxious to see you. That's when Isabella appeared in the hall, carrying Sophia while the twins clung to her skirt. The grandparents' reaction was immediate and obvious, surprised looks that quickly transformed into poorly disguised disapproval. This must be the nanny, said Helen Carvalho, her voice carrying the kind of icy politeness that only high society can perfect. Isabella O'Connor. Isabella introduced herself with a genuine smile, passing Sophia to Edward before extending her hand. It's a pleasure to meet the children's grandparents. They talk about you so much. Do they really? Bernardo didn't seem particularly interested. And how long have you been working in the house? About 2 months, sir. 2 months, Helen Carvalho repeated, as if proving something. What experience do you have with children? I helped raise my 4 younger siblings, Isabella replied patiently. And I've always had a way with children. I see. And your education? Edward felt the air grow heavier. He recognized the tone. It was the same one the Carvalhos had used with him years ago, when he had asked for Helen's hand in marriage. I completed high school, Isabella replied, her chin lifting slightly in silent defiance. And I plan to study education when I have the opportunity. Education, Helen Carvalho murmured. How ambitious. Dinner was social torture. The Carvalhos asked apparently innocent questions that were, in reality, direct attacks on Isabella's suitability. They questioned her educational methods, her experience with children from good families, her understanding of traditional values. Isabella answered everything with grace and dignity, but Edward could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands closed in her lap when she thought no one was looking. Isabella, Bernardo said during dessert, don't take this the wrong way, but we're concerned. These children lost their mother tragically. They need stability, continuity, someone who understands the importance of keeping them connected to their family roots. I completely agree, sir, Isabella replied calmly. That's why I tell them stories about their mommy every night. That's why I let them see photos of her. That's why I never try to take her place. I just try to offer the care and affection they deserve. Helen Carvalho seemed momentarily speechless. She had clearly expected a less articulated response. Well, she finally said, we hope you understand that our concern comes from the love we feel for our grandchildren. Of course I understand, Isabella replied, and I hope you can see that my care for them comes from the same place. The next day, the Carvalho grandparents suggested a trip to the park with the children. Edward was in an important conference call that he couldn't cancel, so Isabella accompanied the group. It was clearly a strategy. They wanted to observe Isabella in action, away from Edward's supervision. The park was a green oasis in the heart of Miami, with elaborate playgrounds and a pond where families fed ducks. Isabella pushed Sophia on the swing while the twins ran toward the slide, their laughter echoing through the morning air. Michael! Gabriel! Bernardo called. Come here with Grandpa. The boys looked hesitantly at Isabella, who nodded encouragingly. Go play with Grandpa and Grandma. I'll stay here with Sophia. The next 30 minutes were a masterclass in child education. Isabella watched from afar while the grandparents tried to interact with their grandchildren, but it became obvious that the children were uncomfortable. Michael became stubborn when Bernardo tried to make him share a toy with a strange child. Gabriel started crying when Helen scolded him for getting his clothes dirty in the sand. "Isabella," Michael screamed, running toward her when the situation became too tense. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Isabella crouched down to his eye level. "Grandpa wants me to give my little truck to that boy, but I don't want to," Michael sobbed. Isabella looked toward where Bernardo was clearly frustrated, trying to force a sharing lesson that clearly wasn't working. "Michael," Isabella said softly, "you brought your little truck to play at the park, didn't you?" "Yes." "And were you having fun with it?" "I was until Grandpa got angry." Isabella smiled patiently. "What do you think about playing together with that little boy? You could make a road in the sand and use the truck together. That where you both have fun." Michael considered the idea. "He can drive the truck on the road I make?" "Of course he can. And you can teach him how to make really cool curves." Michael's little face lit up. "I can? I'll show him how to do it like Daddy used to fly the airplane." Isabella watched Michael run back to the other boy, now excited about the possibility of sharing his knowledge instead of simply giving away his toy. Bernardo was watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "How do you get him to obey like that?" asked Helen Carvalho, approaching with Gabriel in her arms, who had stopped crying. "It's not obedience," Isabella explained, picking up Sophia, who had extended her little arms toward her. "It's understanding. Children need to understand the why of things, not just receive orders." "Gabriel was crying because I said he couldn't play in the sand anymore," Helen said, seeming genuinely confused. "He was getting all dirty." Isabella looked at Gabriel, who had sand stuck to his clothes and hair, but whose eyes shone with happiness. "Gabriel, were you having fun in the sand?" The boy nodded vigorously. "And you know that when we get home, what do we do with dirty clothes?" "We wash them," Gabriel replied excitedly. "That's right. So there's no problem getting dirty while playing because Mrs. Carmen taught us that dirty clothes exist to be washed, right?" Isabella smiled at Helen. "Children need to explore the world with all parts of their body. Dirt comes off, but the joy of playing stays forever in memory." Helen Carvalho remained silent for a long moment, observing Isabella naturally interact with the three children. There was something in the way she moved, always crouching down to their eye level, always touching with affection, always speaking with respect, as if they were real people with valid feelings. "Isabella," Bernardo finally said, "may I ask a personal question?" "Of course, sir. Why did you choose to work as a nanny? An intelligent young woman like you surely has other options." Isabella held Sophia more firmly, feeling the implicit judgment in the question. "I chose it because I love children, Mr. Bernardo, and because these children specifically needed someone to love them unconditionally while they process such a great loss. But it's temporary, isn't it? A job until you get something better." "Better?" Isabella frowned. "I don't know if there's anything better than helping a family heal, than seeing." Michael smile again, Gabriel trust again. Sophia learned that she can still be loved even without mommy. "Don't you have your own family, boyfriend, marriage plans?" The questions were invasive, but Isabella maintained her composure. "I have a wonderful family that supported me when I decided to help you, and my personal plans don't interfere with my care for the children." Bernardo and Helen exchanged a look that Isabella couldn't interpret. "Shall we go home?" Helen finally suggested. "It's getting too hot." During the walk back, Isabella observed how the children naturally gravitated toward her. Michael held her free hand while she carried Sophia. Gabriel walked glued to her leg. It was behavior she had seen hundreds of times, children attaching themselves to whoever offered consistent emotional security. "Isabella," Bernardo said when they arrived at the mansion, "can we talk privately?" She nodded, passing Sophia to Helen, who received her granddaughter with a tenderness Isabella hadn't seen before, and followed Bernardo to the back garden. "I want to apologize," he said abruptly. "Helen and I have been unfair to you." Isabella blinked, surprised. "We lost our daughter," Bernardo continued, his voice becoming heavy. "And when we saw Edward with a young and beautiful nanny, we assumed terrible things about both of your intentions." "Mr. Bernardo, please let me finish." He sighed deeply. "Today, We saw you with our grandchildren. We saw how they trust you, how they obey without fear, how happy they are in your presence. And we realized that perhaps we judged the situation completely wrong." Isabella felt tears sting her eyes. "I would never try to replace Helen. No one could do that." "No, you wouldn't try to replace her," Bernardo agreed. "But you're doing something that might be even more valuable. You're helping our grandchildren remember that they still deserve to be loved." At that moment, Edward appeared at the back door, clearly looking for the group. "Everything okay here?" "More than okay," Bernardo replied, surprising Edward with a genuine smile. "Isabella, Helen and I would like to invite you to dinner with us next week, at our house, as family." Isabella looked at Edward, who seemed as surprised as she was. "I would be honored." "Great," said Bernardo, patting Edward on the shoulder in a way he had never done before. "And Edward, you made the right choice. Your children are in excellent hands." As they walked back to the house, Isabella felt that something fundamental had changed. For the first time since she started working there, she felt she wasn't just caring for the children. She was being accepted as part of the family, even if in an unconventional way. A week after the grandparents' visit, Edward received an invitation that left him in silent panic. Marcus Almeida, organizer of the traditional spring charity ball, called personally to invite him to the most exclusive event in Miami's high society. "Edward, my friend," Marcus's enthusiastic voice echoed through the phone. "It's been a while since we talked. I heard you're finally returning to social life." Edward frowned. "Returning to social life?" "Oh, people have been commenting about your new family situation. It seems you found charming company to help with the children." Edward's stomach contracted. The rumors had already started. "Marcus, I think there's a misunderstanding." "Nonsense, you don't need to be modest. Bernardo Carvalho told me you're taking very good care of his grandchildren, and that there's an adorable young woman helping with the children. He said she's a true lady." Edward was surprised. Bernardo had spoken well of Isabella. "Well," Marcus continued, "the ball is next Saturday at the country club. Charity auction, dinner, dancing. You can bring the children. We have a special area for the little ones with professional babysitters. And of course your companion will be very welcome." After hanging up, Edward stared at the phone for several minutes. How could he explain to Marcus that Isabella was just the nanny? And more importantly, why didn't the idea of taking her as his companion bother him as much as it should? When he told Isabella about the invitation that afternoon, she was visibly nervous. "Mr. Edward, I don't know if it's appropriate," she said, her green eyes reflecting anxiety. I don't belong to that world." "Neither did I." "Originally," Edward replied softly. "My grandfather was a butcher before becoming a banker. Sometimes belonging is just a matter of behavior. But I don't have anything to wear. I don't have jewelry. I don't know how to behave at events like this." Edward observed Isabella for a long moment. There was something deeply touching about her vulnerability, the way she worried about not embarrassing him or the children. "Isabella," he said gently, "you've already proven several times that you know exactly how to behave, with dignity, grace, and authenticity. As for the dress, leave that to me." The next day, Edward instructed Patricia Mendez, his executive secretary for 5 years, to arrange an appropriate dress for Isabella. Patricia, an elegant and sophisticated 32-year-old woman, received the instruction with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Patricia had harbored feelings for Edward since Helen died. In fact, if she were honest with herself, the feelings had started before that, but she had always respected his marriage. Helen's death had awakened hopes she kept carefully hidden. The idea of Edward being interested in a simple young nanny bothered her deeply. When Isabella went to the office to pick up the dress, Patricia received her with cold politeness and presented a piece that was technically appropriate but completely inadequate for Isabella. The black dress had a cut that didn't flatter her body type, an excessively revealing neckline, and a fit that made her look uncomfortable and out of place. "It's perfect for you," Patricia lied with a forced smile. "Very young and modern." Isabella looked at herself in the fitting room mirror and felt her heart sink. The dress wasn't right. She knew it intuitively, but didn't have enough experience to articulate the problem. Besides, she didn't want to seem ungrateful or demanding. "Thank you, Patricia," she said politely, taking the wrapped dress home. When she arrived at the O'Connor family house that tight, her mother, Patricia, immediately noticed the problem. "Isabella Marie O'Connor," she said in her Irish accented English. "What the hell is this thing?" "It's my dress for the ball, Mom." Patricia examined the piece with the experienced eyes of a seamstress. "This dress wasn't made for you, girl. Look at this cut, and it's completely wrong for your body type. And this neckline." She shook her head disapprovingly. "It's going to make you look like one of those girls trying to get attention. For the wrong reasons." Isabella felt tears of frustration sting her eyes. "But it's what I have, Mom. I can't ask for another one." Patricia observed her daughter for a long moment, then disappeared into the bedroom. When she returned, she was carrying a garment bag protected by plastic. "Remember Mrs. Antonietta?" she asked. "That client who ordered a party dress 2 years ago and never came to pick it up?" Isabella nodded. Mrs. Antonietta had made a down payment, but then disappeared without explanation, leaving a custom-made dress behind. "Well," said Patricia, opening the bag, "she had about your measurements. And this dress." She revealed a stunning navy blue piece, classic and elegant, with lace details and a cut that would be perfect for Isabella. "This dress was waiting for you." Isabella touched the fabric delicately. It was pure silk, with a drape that would be both sophisticated and conservative. The navy blue would perfectly complement her green eyes, and the classic cut was timeless. "Mom, it's beautiful, but—" "No buts," interrupted Patricia, already getting her measuring tape. "That woman paid in advance and never came back. After 2 years, I consider the dress abandoned. And you, my daughter, deserve to feel like the princess you are." For the next 2 hours, Patricia worked with an artist's precision, adjusting every detail of the dress to Isabella's body. When she finished, Isabella looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The navy blue dress embraced her curves elegantly, the modest but feminine neckline, the 3/4 sleeves sophisticated without being too conservative. The color enhanced her green eyes and made her blonde hair look golden in the light. "My God," she whispered. "Now that's right," said Patricia with satisfaction. "Now you look like an O'Connor. Never forget, Isabella, it's not the clothes that make the person, it's the person who makes the clothes worthwhile." Saturday of the ball dawned with clear golden skies, as if even the weather was conspiring to make the night perfect. Edward spent the day with nervousness he couldn't completely explain. It wasn't just the anxiety of returning to social life after months of seclusion. There was something more, something related to the prospect of seeing Isabella in her element. When it was time to pick her up, Edward put on his favorite black tuxedo and dressed Michael and Gabriel in their best suits. Sophia wore a pink little dress that made her look like a porcelain doll. "Daddy, you look handsome," said Michael, adjusting his bow tie seriously. "And you look beautiful," Edward replied, feeling a wave of paternal love he hadn't experienced in months. "Behave well tonight, okay? We're going to meet important people." "Is Bella coming with us?" asked Gabriel. "Yes, she is." "Then it's going to be fun," declared Michael with a child's confidence. When Isabella opened her house door, Edward felt as if someone had punched his diaphragm. The transformation was complete. She was absolutely stunning. The navy blue dress made her look like a princess from a fairy tale, but a real princess, accessible, warm. "Isabella," he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. You look beautiful." She blushed slightly. "Thank you. My mother made some adjustments." "Bella!" screamed the twins, running toward her. "You look just like a princess." "Thank you, my princes," she replied, kissing each one on the forehead. "You look very elegant too." During the drive to the country club, Edward couldn't stop looking at Isabella through the rearview mirror. There was something different about her tonight. Not just the clothes, but a subtle confidence he hadn't seen before, as if she was beginning to believe she deserved to be there. The country club was transformed for the event. Golden lights wrapped around the classic columns, white and gold flowers decorated each table, and Miami's elite circulated in their finest attire. It was exactly the kind of event Edward used to attend with Helen, and for a moment, the familiarity of the scene made him nostalgic. "Is everything okay?" Isabella asked softly, noticing his expression. "Yes," he replied, surprised by her perceptive ability. "Just memories." She nodded understandingly and held Michael's hand more firmly, as if wanting to offer support through the children. When they entered the main ballroom, The impact was immediate. Conversations stopped briefly, while people absorbed the sight of widower Edward Santana with a stunning woman and his 3 children. To those who didn't know the situation, they looked exactly like what Marcus Almeida had suggested. A perfect family. "Edward," Marcus approached with a radiant smile. "What a joy to see you here. And this must be Isabella." "Isabella O'Connor," she introduced herself with a warm smile, extending her hand. "Delighted," said Marcus, kissing her hand gallantly. "The children look beautiful." "Michael, Gabriel, you've grown so much." The twins hid behind Isabella, still shy, but she encouraged them gently. "Say hi to Mr. Marcus, boys. He organized this beautiful party." "Hi," they said in unison, drawing smiles from the surrounding adults. "The children's area is over there," Marcus pointed. "We have professional babysitters, toys, special snacks for the children." "Can I go with them?" Isabella asked Edward. "Of course." Edward watched her walk to the children's area, noticing how she immediately connected with the other children present, how the twins relaxed in her presence, how Sophia clapped excitedly when she saw the colorful toys. "Edward," a familiar voice made him turn around. It was Helen Carvalho, elegant in a burgundy silk dress. "Helen," he greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. "I didn't know you were coming. Marcus invited us personally. He said it would be an opportunity to see our grandchildren in a more social environment." She paused meaningfully. "Isabella looks beautiful." Edward followed her gaze to where Isabella was crouching down to help Sophia reach a toy. "She's special," he said, the words coming out with more feeling than intended. "She really is," Helen Carvalho agreed. "Bernardo and I have talked a lot about her since our visit. Initially, I confess we had our reservations. And now we see that our grandchildren are happy for the first time since—" She didn't finish the sentence, but didn't need to. "Edward, may I give unsolicited advice?" He nodded. "Don't let others' prejudices dictate your decisions. Isabella may not have come from our social class, but she has something money can't buy, a pure heart and genuine love for your children." Edward was surprised by the candor of the statement. "Helen, you don't need to explain yourself to anyone, Edward. Not to me, not to Bernardo, not to all of this society." She gestured to the crowded ballroom. "You just need to be happy, and your children deserve to see you happy." Before Edward could respond, Marcus took the stage to begin the charity auction. People headed to their tables, and Edward went to get Isabella and the children. During dinner, Edward watched fascinated as Isabella navigated the social conversations. She didn't pretend to be something she wasn't. She remained authentically herself, but there was a natural grace in her manners that impressed everyone around the table. "Isabella," said Margaret Santos, wife of an important industrialist, "Edward told us you care for his children. What background do you have in child education?" It was the kind of question that could have been a disguised attack, but Isabella answered with honesty and dignity. "I don't have specific academic training, but I helped raise my 4 younger siblings and always had a way with children," she replied. "I believe caring for children is both intuition and technique, and genuine love for them makes all the difference." "How wise," commented Margaret, genuinely impressed. "And your future plans?" "I plan to study education when I have the opportunity," said Isabella. "But for now, I'm very happy caring for Michael, Gabriel, and Sophia. They've taught me as much as I hope I've taught them." Edward felt a strange pride flooding his chest. Isabella was being completely herself, without trying to impress or apologize for who she was, and that was impressing more than any pose could have. "The children seem to adore you," observed Robert Santos. "The feeling is mutual," Isabella replied, smiling at the twins who were playing politely with the other boys in the reserved area. "They're wonderful children. Intelligent, affectionate, resilient." "Resilient?" asked Margaret. Isabella looked at Edward, asking for silent permission. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "They lost their mother very young," Isabella said softly, "but they have a father who loves them deeply and are learning to process the loss in a healthy way. It's inspiring to see how children can find joy again when they feel safe and loved." A respectful silence hung over the table. It was exactly the kind of moment that could have become embarrassing, but Isabella had conducted the conversation with such tact and sincerity that everyone felt touched, not uncomfortable. "What beautiful words," Robert finally said. "Edward, you're a lucky man." Edward looked at Isabella, who was helping Gabriel cut his food, even from the distance of her chair, anticipating his needs without making a show of it. "Yes," he said, his voice laden with meaning, "I really am." It was at that moment that Edward realized something that completely surprised him. The people around the table weren't just being polite to Isabella, they genuinely liked her. More than that, they saw them as a family, and for the first time in 8 months, Edward didn't feel bothered by the idea. Later that night, when the music began and people headed to the dance floor, Edward found himself at an emotional crossroads. Isabella was sitting at the table, watching the twins play with other children in the reserved area, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her lap. There was something profoundly maternal about the scene, something that touched a part of his soul he thought had died along with Helen. "Isabella," he said, extending his hand, "would you like to dance?" She looked at him with surprise. "I don't know how to waltz very well." "Neither do I," he lied gently. "We'll learn together." Isabella carefully passed Sophia to Helen Carvalho, who had offered to stay with the baby, and accepted Edward's hand. On the dance floor, under the golden lights of the crystal chandelier, Edward pulled Isabella close. She was clearly nervous. He could feel the tension in her shoulders, see the worry in her green eyes. "Relax," he murmured in her ear as they began to move to the rhythm of the music. "There's nowhere in the world I'd rather be right now." Isabella looked at him, surprised, and Edward realized he had revealed more than he intended. But he didn't care. For 8 months he had hidden behind pain, work, guilt. Tonight, with Isabella in his arms and his children happy just a few meters away, he felt alive for the first time since the accident. "Edward," Isabella whispered, "people are staring." "Let them stare," he replied, spinning her gently. "You look beautiful, the children are happy, and for the first time in a long time, I feel complete." The words came out before he could censor them, and Isabella stopped dancing for a moment, her eyes widening. "Edward, I know," he said quickly. "I know it's complicated. I know you're the children's nanny, that there are differences between us, that I'm still processing Helen's loss. But Isabella," he stopped dancing too, holding her hands, "you brought something back to our house that I thought I had lost forever." "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hope," he replied simply. "Joy. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, our family can be happy again." Isabella felt tears sting her eyes. "Edward, I never wanted to complicate your life. I just wanted to care for the children. And you did that beautifully," he said, using the word intentionally, remembering her Irish heritage. "But Isabella, you did more than that. You healed us. You healed me." The music continued around them, but they had stopped moving completely. Other couples danced, but Edward and Isabella were in their own world, processing the confession that would change everything between them. "The children," Isabella began. "The children adore you," Edward interrupted. "They trust you in a way that makes me jealous sometimes, but it also makes me grateful, because I know that whatever happens, they have someone who loves them unconditionally." "Edward," her voice was laden with emotion, "I need you to know, I never tried. I never wanted to take advantage of the situation. I never wanted to replace Helen." "I know," he said, touching her face gently, "and that's exactly why I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibilities. Isabella stared at him, her green eyes reflecting a mixture of hope, fear, and love she could no longer hide. "I'm falling in love with you too," she finally whispered. "With you and the children, with this whole beautiful broken family that somehow became mine too." Edward smiled, the first genuine and complete smile he had given since the accident. And in that moment, with Isabella in his arms and his children safe just a few meters away, he knew he had found his way back to life. "So," he said, gently resuming dancing, "what do we do now?" "Now," Isabella replied, letting him guide her through the music, "we take care of each other, and we build something new without forgetting what came before." It was exactly the answer Edward needed to hear. They danced for the rest of the song in comfortable silence, both knowing their lives had changed irreversibly that night, and both ready to embrace that change together. 3 weeks after the ball, on a sunny November morning, Michael ran to Isabella with his favorite toy airplane, the same one that had belonged to his father. "Bella, look," he screamed, making the little plane fly in circles around the room. "Daddy, let's fly higher. Let's fly to heaven to find Mommy." The boy's words hit Edward like lightning. He was at the room's doorway, returning from a meeting, and had stopped to observe the domestic scene that had become so precious to him in recent weeks. But Michael's innocent play awakened a pain he thought he had begun to process. Isabella immediately noticed the change in Edward's expression. Michael continued playing, oblivious to the emotional impact of his words, but Isabella could see the tension in Edward's shoulders, the way his hands involuntarily clenched. "Michael," she said softly, "how about we show Daddy how you learn to make the airplane land smoothly?" The boy ran toward his father, holding the little plane. "Daddy, want to play flying with me?" Edward looked at the toy in his son's small hands and felt his throat close up. For 8 months he had avoided anything related to aviation, magazines, TV programs, even toys. But now, seeing the hope shining in Michael's eyes, he realized his escape was harming more than protecting. "Of course, champ," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. Later that night, after the children went to sleep, Isabella found Edward on the terrace looking at the starry sky with a distant expression. "How was your day?" she asked gently, sitting beside him on the rocking chair that Helen used to use. "Michael said something today," Edward began, his voice heavy, "about flying to find Mommy." Isabella nodded. "I heard." "Isabella," Edward paused, struggling with the words. "I can't even look at an airplane without seeing the accident. Here again. I hear the sound of the engines failing, smell the smoke, and the last thing Helen said before impact was a prayer to protect the children." Isabella extended her hand and touched his softly. "Do you want to tell me about the accident?" Edward took a deep breath, and for the first time since the tragedy, he told everything. Helen's premonition, his own arrogance in ignoring the signs, the decision not to buy a new plane, the exact moment when he realized he couldn't avoid the crash, and especially Helen's final sacrifice. "She died saving me and saving the children," he said, tears finally streaming down his face. "And I couldn't save her." "Edward," Isabella said firmly, "you saved your children. You landed that plane when any other pilot would have died. Helen knew that. That's why she could make her choice with peace and because she trusted you. But I should have listened to her nightmares, should have bought a new plane. And if you had listened, if you had bought a new plane?" Isabella turned to face him. "Do you think Helen would have preferred to live in a prison of what-ifs? Do you think she'd like to see you punishing yourself for the following 8 months, missing precious moments with your children?" Edward remained silent, processing her words. "Michael wants to fly with you," Isabella continued softly. "Not because he doesn't understand the danger, but because he sees his father as his hero. And Gabriel draws airplanes because he associates flying with happy moments beside his father. They're not afraid of flying, Edward. They're afraid you'll never be happy again." "How can I go back to flying?" he asked, his voice broken. "How can I risk losing them too?" "You won't lose them," Isabella said with conviction, "because now you know every moment is precious. You'll be even more careful, even more attentive, and they'll have memories of a brave father who overcame his fears for love." Edward remained silent for several minutes, looking at the stars that Helen used to say were angels watching over their family. "Would you come with us?" he finally asked. If I found the courage to fly again?" "Wherever you go," Isabella replied without hesitation. "I'll go too." 2 weeks later, Edward stood in front of the airfield hangar, his hands trembling slightly as he signed the rental papers. He had chosen a model similar to what he piloted before the accident, but completely inspected and certified. Every system had been tested. 3 times. Isabella held Sophia while Michael and Gabriel ran excitedly around the small aircraft, their voices echoing in the hangar. "Is it just like our old plane, Daddy?" asked Michael, touching the fuselage with reverence. "Very similar, son," Edward replied, his voice firmer than he felt. "But this one here is perfect, all inspected and safe." "Are we going to fly really high?" asked Gabriel. "As high as you want," Edward promised, helping Isabella get comfortable in the passenger seat, with Sophia in her lap. When he started the engines, Edward felt his heart race. The familiar roar of the turbines brought back all the memories, the good and the traumatic. But this time, there was a fundamental difference. He wasn't alone in his fear. Isabella was beside him, radiating calm confidence, and his children were behind him, trusting completely in his ability to protect them. The takeoff was smooth, and as they gained altitude, Edward felt something he hadn't experienced in almost a year. The pure joy of flying. The sky was crystal clear, with white clouds scattered like cotton against the infinite blue. "Wow!" screamed Michael, pressing his little face against the window. "Look how everything gets tiny down there." "The houses look like dollhouses," Gabriel observed in wonder. Sophia clapped her hands and laughed, apparently loving the sensation of being in the air. "Edward," Isabella said softly, "look at them. Look how happy they are." Edward looked in the rear view mirror and saw his children completely ecstatic, without a trace of fear. They trusted him absolutely, and that trust strengthened him more than any therapy could have. "Daddy," Michael said after a few minutes, "can you fly higher? I want to see if we can touch the clouds." Edward exchanged a look with Isabella, who nodded encouragingly. "Let's climb a little higher," he said, gaining altitude until they were flying above the clouds. What revealed itself before them was a celestial spectacle, an infinite sea of white clouds extending to the horizon, bathed in the golden light of the sun. "My God," Isabella whispered, "it's like we're in heaven." "Wow, Daddy," Michael was breathless. "It looks like a giant cotton carpet." Gabriel remained silent for a moment, absorbing the beauty of the scene. Then, with the innocent wisdom of a child, he asked, "Daddy, is Mommy up here?" Edward felt his throat tighten, but this time not with panic, with pure emotion. "Yes, son," he said, his voice choked. "She's here somewhere with God. Look how beautiful it is up here. This is a very special place. In the future, I want to live here with Mommy too," said Gabriel dreamily. Edward swallowed hard, knowing this meant that someday they would all die. But instead of fear, he felt a strange peace. "Yes, my son, someday we'll all be together again." A contemplative silence hung over the cabin. Everyone became absorbed in the beauty of the moment, Edward piloting with a tranquility he hadn't felt in months. Isabella watching the family she had learned to love heal before her eyes, the children processing complex concepts with childhood's natural acceptance. "Ready," Edward finally said, breaking the sacred silence. "Let's go down and head to our next adventure." "Where are we going, Daddy?" asked Michael. Edward smiled, a complete and genuine smile. "We're going to Disney World, all of us, including our Isabella." The children's screams of joy filled the cabin, and Edward knew he had found his way back not just to aviation, but to life. Disney World was everything Edward had imagined and more. Seeing his children run from ride to ride, their laughter echoing through the theme parks, Isabella accompanying them with inexhaustible energy, all of this created a collection of memories he knew he would treasure forever. But it was one specific moment that sealed his complete transformation. They were on the Space Mountain roller coaster, Sophia being too small for the ride, so she had stayed with Isabella while Edward took the twins. When they got off the ride, Edward carried Sophia so Isabella could go on the attraction with Michael and Gabriel. Sitting on a nearby bench, watching Isabella laugh and scream along with his children, Edward felt a completeness he hadn't experienced since before the accident. Sophia slept peacefully in his arms, completely confident in her safety. In the distance, he could hear Michael and Gabriel's laughter mixed with Isabella's. "Daddy!" Michael ran toward him when they got off the ride. "It was so much fun. Bella screamed more than us." "I did not scream," Isabella protested, laughing. "I just expressed my joy vocally." "That's screaming, Bella," said Gabriel with a child's implacable logic. Edward laughed, a deep and genuine laugh that surprised even himself. In that moment, surrounded by his family, because that's what they had become, a family, he felt blessed in a way he couldn't express in words. "Isabella," he said that night, after the children went to sleep at the hotel, "I need to tell you something." They were on the room's balcony, watching Disney's distant fireworks. "What is it?" she asked, noticing the seriousness in his voice. "I want you to know that this isn't temporary for me. You, the children, this family we've built, I want it to be forever." Isabella felt tears sting her eyes. "Edward, I know it's still early," he continued quickly. "I know you have your own dreams, your own plans, but I want you to know that when you're ready, when you feel comfortable, I would very much like to make this something official. Official as in I would like to marry you," he said simply. "Not to replace Helen. I could never do that, but to build something new with you, to give the children the stability they deserve, and for me to have the chance to love again. Isabella remained silent for a long moment, processing the proposal. "Edward," she finally said, "from the first day in that house, I knew I was falling in love not just with you, but with this whole family, with the twins who taught me that children can be resilient and loving even after such a terrible loss, with Sophia, who showed me that babies know how to recognize true love, and with you, who taught me that men can be vulnerable and strong at the same time." "Is it a yes?" he asked, hopeful. "It's a yes, but," she replied with a smile, "yes, I want to build a life with you. But I want to do it the right way. I want the children to participate in the decision. I want to meet your family, officially introduce you to mine, and I want to finish my education degree. With your help, I hope." Edward smiled. "Isabella O'Connor, you're the wisest woman I've ever met. And you, Edward Santana, are the bravest man, not just for landing that plane, but for finding the courage to love again." They kissed under the Florida stars, knowing they were sealing not just their love, but their commitment to build a family based on honoring the past and hope for the future. 2 years later, the morning was golden and perfect for a wedding. Isabella adjusted her veil in the mirror of the room that had been Helen's, but was now hers too, not as a replacement, but as a continuation of a family love story. "You look beautiful, Isabella," said Helen Carvalho, entering the room with Sophia, now 3.5 years old, dressed as a flower girl. "Thank you for everything." "Helen," said Isabella, embracing the mother-in-law who had become a true mother to her, "for accepting me, for supporting me, for understanding that I would never try to erase your daughter's memory." "Dear," said Helen Carvalho, her eyes shining with happy tears, "you didn't erase her memory, you honored it. My grandchildren know exactly who the mother was who loved them first, and now they're lucky to have a mother who loves them too. 2 mothers, 2 blessings." Sophia ran toward Isabella, her blonde curls bouncing. "Mommy Bella, you look just like a princess." Isabella smiled, wiping away a tear. Sophia had started calling her Mommy Bella naturally, without pressure or encouragement, simply because that's how she saw her. Michael and Gabriel still referred to her as Bella most of the time, but occasionally a mom would slip out that filled Isabella's heart with joy. "Thank you, my love," said Isabella, kissing Sophia's forehead. "You look beautiful too, ready to throw rose petals. So ready." The ceremony was simple and perfect, held in the mansion's garden where it all began. Edward looked elegant in his tuxedo, but it was his eyes that shone brightest, with love, gratitude, and hope for the future. Michael and Gabriel, now 6 years old, carried the rings with the seriousness of little adults. Sophia scattered rose petals with exuberant joy, and when Isabella walked down the improvised aisle, there wasn't just a groom waiting for her, there was an entire family. "Isabella," said Edward during the vows they had written together, "you came into our lives like an angel disguised as a nanny. You brought back our joy, our capacity to love, our hope for tomorrow. I promise to honor not only you, but Helen's memory, building a family where love multiplies instead of divides." "Edward," Isabella replied, her voice clear and emotional, "you taught me that family isn't just blood. It's the daily choice to care, protect, and love unconditionally. I promise to be not only your wife, but a loving mother to Michael, Gabriel, and Sophia, always honoring the extraordinary woman who brought them into the world." When they kissed, sealing their union, it wasn't just a kiss between 2 adults in love. It was the celebration of a family that had found a path through pain to joy, through loss to renewed love. 3 months later, Isabella started her education degree, with Edward taking care of the children on class nights. 6 months later, Edward returned to flying regularly, taking the family on small weekend trips. A year later, when Isabella graduated, they opened a small preschool in Helen's memory, where children in vulnerable situations received free quality education. And on a spring morning 2 years after the wedding, Isabella woke Edward with news that would definitively complete their family. "Edward," she whispered, gently shaking him. "Wake up." "What is it?" he murmured, still sleepy. "We have news." Something in her tone made him wake up completely. "What kind of news?" Isabella smiled, placing her hands over her still flat belly. "The kind that's going to make Michael, Gabriel, and Sophia become big siblings." Edward sat up immediately, his eyes widening. "Isabella, are you "I'm pregnant," she confirmed, tears of joy streaming down her face. Edward pulled her into a hug that lasted eternities, both crying with happiness. Outside, they could hear Michael and Gabriel playing in the garden, Sophia singing in the next room. Soon there would be a new laugh joining the family chorus. "Would Helen be happy?" Isabella asked softly. Edward looked into her eyes, his answer laden with absolute certainty. Helen would be radiant. She always said she wanted a large family, full of love and laughter. And that's exactly what we have. What an incredible story, isn't it? Have you ever found family in totally unexpected places? Have you ever had someone enter your life at a difficult moment and become something even more important than you imagined? Have you ever witnessed how love can heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend? Share your own stories of love, healing, and second chances in the comments below, because that's what this story teaches us. That family is something we build every day with care, patience, and unconditional love. That pain can be transformed into joy when we find people willing to walk with us through darkness until we reach the light again. And if this story touched your hearts like it touched mine, don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to start over, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that the most beautiful families are those we choose to nurture with love until we can all flourish together. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate the transformative power of chosen love, family healing, and hope that never dies. Because in the end, as Edward, Isabella, and the children discovered, sometimes angels come to us disguised as ordinary people, and miracles happen when we open our hearts to love again.